What happens when 5 armed hunters realize they're no longer the ones doing the hunting, when overconfidence meets deadly accuracy hidden deep within a Virginia forest? Tonight, we reveal a story the history books somehow overlooked. An account of revenge served cold, one bullet after another. Subscribe now for more forgotten tales from America's darkest moments. The October mist wrapped itself around the Virginia forest like a burial shroud, quieting the steps of 5 men who advanced with the swagger of predators. This was October 1863, 2 months after Gettysburg's smoke had finally cleared, with the war dragging on endlessly. For these men, though, bounty hunters who labeled themselves slave catchers, the war meant opportunity rather than tragedy. Marcus "Bull" Henderson commanded the group, his weather-beaten face marked by scars from countless brutal encounters. At 42, he'd accumulated considerable wealth, returning human property to those who claimed ownership, whether breathing or not. The reward notices rarely clarified which outcome they preferred. His notoriety stretched from the Carolinas to the Ohio River, mentioned with equal measures of dread and admiration among enslaved and enslavers alike. Bull had perfected his craft during those harsh years following Nat Turner's rebellion, when suspicion infected everything, and any black face could translate into payment if nobody asked inconvenient questions. The leather coat draping his shoulders had belonged to a plantation owner who attempted cheating Bull of his reward money. That man's blood had long since vanished. Though Bull preserved the coat as proof, he bowed to no one except himself and the pursuit of money. His rifle, a specially modified Sharps .50 caliber, had accompanied him for more than 10 years. He'd carved notches into the stock, not for every death exactly, but for every capture that had made him wealthy. 43 notches represented 43 human souls dragged back into bondage. Tracks are recent. Tommy Briggs murmured, the youngest at 19, his voice shaking with anticipation more than terror. Probably no more than an hour ahead of us. Tommy represented Bull's newest acquisition, a Tennessee farm boy whose family lost everything when Union forces torched their crops. The youngster had joined Bull's outfit, hoping for simple money and excitement, though also carrying bitter resentment toward anyone he held responsible for his family's misfortune. His rifle had belonged to his father, an aged hunting piece, and he handled it with the reverence of someone yet to kill a man, but desperately wanting to prove himself capable. The boy's eagerness reminded Bull of himself 20 years earlier, when hunger and youth drove him to do anything for payment. Back then, Bull had convinced himself he simply followed the law, collecting legitimate bounties on escaped property. Years passed before he abandoned the excuses and simply accepted what he'd become, a predator thriving on human suffering. Behind them, the Kowalski brothers, Polish immigrants who discovered their purpose in this cruel profession, inspected their rifles with practiced efficiency. Stefan and Pavel had arrived in America possessing nothing except the clothes they wore and their willingness to do whatever survival demanded. They'd picked up English by hearing the screams of captured runaways, learned American geography by pursuing human quarry through swampland and woodland. Stefan, 28 and the elder, carried a jagged scar across his left cheek from a desperate enslaved man who fought back using a broken bottle. He'd killed that man slowly for marking him, and the memory still brought a smile. Pavel, 2 years younger, handled tracking for the pair. He could follow trails days old, reading signs in bent grass and disturbed soil that others would completely miss. The fifth man, Clayton Webb, a former overseer, spat tobacco juice and grinned, revealing teeth stained brown from years of chewing. Clayton had lost his last plantation position for excessive cruelty, an achievement requiring real effort, within a system built on violence. He joined Bull's crew because it let him continue inflicting pain while receiving payment for it. Clayton specialized in psychological destruction. He understood breaking spirits without damaging valuable merchandise. How to employ fear and humiliation to guarantee compliance. His saddlebags contained various implements designed not to kill, but to maximize suffering. Leather restraints, iron cuffs, and a collection of branding irons bearing different plantation owners' marks. Just one runaway. Bull muttered, studying footprints pressed into soft earth. Probably terrified out of her mind. Easy money, boys. Those tracks belonged to a young woman, early 20s perhaps, judging by impression size and depth. She moved rapidly but without panic. Her stride remained too consistent, too controlled for someone fleeing blindly. This suggested either prior experience or training, making Bull slightly more watchful than usual. What they couldn't know was that 30 feet overhead, concealed within an ancient oak's thick canopy, Sergeant Isaiah Washington monitored their every action through his Springfield rifle's scope. His breathing stayed controlled, his heartbeat steady, the same calm that had made him legendary throughout the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. Isaiah had constructed his hiding place with masterful patience. Branches carefully interwoven created a natural blind, positioned to exploit the morning sun's angle. Mud and charcoal darkened his uniform, and he'd applied pine sap to exposed skin to hide his scent. Every detail planned and executed with the precision that had preserved his life through 2 years of America's bloodiest conflict. His Springfield rifle represented craftsmanship, customized by the regiment's armorer to his exact specifications. The trigger adjusted to a crisp 2-pound pull. The barrel hand lapped for accuracy, the stock slightly shortened to accommodate his long arms. Most crucially, the scope, a rare and costly addition, had been zeroed for ranges from 100 to 400 yards. Isaiah had built his reputation not through boasting or bravado, but through results. 47 confirmed kills during 2 years of service. Each a Confederate officer or sniper who would never threaten Union soldiers again. Fellow soldiers called him Ghost, not because he seemed supernatural, but because death appeared to trail him like a shadow, always claiming his enemies while leaving him untouched. Yet the nickname carried deeper significance for Isaiah. He'd learned to become invisible, to navigate hostile territory leaving no trace, to attack without warning and vanish before retaliation became possible. A skill born of necessity. Black soldiers captured by Confederate forces faced torture and execution rather than prisoner of war status. The techniques he'd mastered came through trial and error, refined across countless missions behind enemy lines. He could remain motionless for hours, control his breathing and heartbeat to near hibernation levels, read wind patterns and atmospheric conditions with meteorological precision. Most importantly, he'd learned to think like his quarry, anticipating their movements and positioning himself accordingly. But Isaiah no longer wore the soldier's mantle. 3 weeks earlier, word had reached him that his younger sister Sarah had escaped Whitmore Plantation in Richmond. She traveled north via the Underground Railroad, though Confederate patrols and bounty hunters made the journey treacherous. Isaiah requested leave to find her. His commanding officer refused. That refusal came wrapped in explanations about military necessity and greater good. But Isaiah heard what remained unspoken. One runaway slave, even a decorated soldier's sister, wasn't worth risking a valuable asset. The Union Army needed his skills more than he needed to save his family. So Isaiah made a choice that would brand him deserter. He left his unit heading south, following the same routes he knew Sarah would take. He'd found evidence of her passage. A torn dress fragment caught on thorn bush, footprints matching her small feet. But he'd also discovered something else. The slave catchers had been trailing her too. For 2 days, Isaiah had tracked both his sister and her pursuers, staying far enough behind to avoid detection, while close enough to intervene if necessary. He'd watched the bounty hunters work, observed their casual cruelty and professional efficiency. These weren't desperate men shaped by circumstances. They were predators who'd chosen this life because they relished it. Now, watching the 5 men below, Isaiah felt that familiar calm preceding violence. These weren't soldiers fighting any cause, however misguided. These were men who earned their living hunting human beings for profit. Men who would drag his sister back to bondage and brutality without hesitation. The wind shifted, carrying tobacco scent and unwashed bodies up to his perch. Isaiah adjusted position slightly. Movement so subtle trained eyes would miss it entirely. Below, Bull Henderson raised his hand, signaling the group to halt. "Something's not right," Bull said, his voice barely audible. Years of hunting had developed instincts that kept him alive when other bounty hunters ended up face down in ditches. Bull's unease stemmed from nothing visible or audible. Just a feeling, that subtle wrongness experienced hunters learned to trust. The forest had grown too quiet, birds too silent. Even insects seemed muted, as if nature itself held its breath. "What do you mean?" Clayton asked, fingers nervously working his rifle. "Too quiet." Bull replied, scanning surrounding trees. "Birds stopped singing maybe 5 minutes ago. Either a storm's coming, or—" Tommy's voice cracked slightly. "Or what?" Bull's eyes narrowed, studying the canopy above. "Oh. Or we're not the only hunters in these woods." The old bounty hunter had survived 2 decades in a profession with high mortality by trusting his instincts. He'd learned to read subtle signs preceding ambush. How animals behaved when predators neared, those almost imperceptible changes in air pressure and sound warning of danger. Isaiah smiled grimly. The old bounty hunter possessed good instincts, though they wouldn't save him. Through his scope, Isaiah spotted sweat beading Bull's forehead despite the cool October air. The man sensed something wrong without pinpointing what. The problem with hunting humans, Isaiah reflected, is that sometimes your prey can hunt you back. These men had spent so long as predators they'd forgotten what being prey felt like. They were about receiving a harsh reminder. He shifted aim slightly, crosshairs centering on Bull's chest. At this range, barely 100 yards, an easy shot, but Isaiah possessed patience. He'd learned long ago the difference between good snipers and dead ones was knowing when to shoot and when to wait. The tactical situation was perfect. 5 men spread enough for individual engagement, yet close enough they couldn't provide effective mutual support. The terrain favored him. Multiple escape routes, excellent concealment, clear fields of fire. Most importantly, they had no idea he existed. Below, the 5 men continued advancing, though their confidence was cracking. They moved more cautiously now, rifles ready, eyes constantly scanning surroundings. Beginning to understand, they might have walked into something beyond their control. As mist swirled around ancient trees, Isaiah Washington prepared to teach them exactly how dangerous their chosen profession could become. The hunt was beginning, though this time roles would reverse. The memories surfaced unbounded as Isaiah watched the bounty hunters below. Gettysburg, July 1863, the war's turning point, though none recognized it then. Isaiah had positioned himself in a damaged church's bell tower, providing overwatch for advancing Union troops when he spotted a Confederate sniper in a barn loft. Nearly 400 yards distant, that enemy marksman had been picking off Union soldiers with methodical precision, each shot claiming another life. Isaiah watched through his scope as the Confederate adjusted aim toward wounded soldiers being evacuated by stretcher bearers. The man prepared to fire when Isaiah's bullet found its mark, sending the enemy sniper tumbling from his perch. Later, when Union forces secured the barn, they discovered a journal among the dead sniper's possessions. Robert Caldwell had been his name, writing letters to his wife and young daughter back in Georgia. His final entry expressed hope the war would end soon so he could return to his family's farm. Isaiah had kept that journal, though never understanding why. Perhaps to remind himself even enemies were human beings with families and dreams. Or perhaps to remember that in war, death was often the only certainty. That journal now rested in his pack, pages yellowed and worn from constant handling during quiet moments between battles. Reading Caldwell's words taught Isaiah something important about conflict's nature. That Confederate sniper hadn't been evil. He'd been a farmer defending homeland, fighting for what he believed right. But the bounty hunters below represented something altogether different. They fought for no ideology or homeland. They profited from human misery. That distinction mattered. At Gettysburg, Isaiah had killed soldiers trying to kill him and his comrades. War, brutal and necessary, yet conducted between combatants understanding the stakes. What he prepared to do here was different. Execution, pure and simple. These men had forfeited mercies right the moment. They decided to make their living hunting human beings. Now, watching Bull Henderson and his men, Isaiah felt no such conflicted emotions. These weren't soldiers fighting homeland or beliefs. These were predators profiting from human misery, and they'd made the fatal mistake of hunting his sister. The memory of Sarah's last letter haunted him. She'd managed smuggling it out through a sympathetic house slave, reaching him just before Chancellorsville. In careful, precise handwriting, she'd learned reading and writing secretly, a crime punishable by whipping. She described life on Whitmore Plantation. The work backbreaking, food insufficient, punishment severe. But worse than physical hardship was constant fear. The knowledge she was completely powerless, that her body and future belonged to someone else. She'd written about watching other enslaved people sold, about families torn apart on auction blocks, about hope's slow erosion with each passing day. "I dream about freedom every night," she'd written. "I dream about walking where I want to walk, saying what I want to say, being treated like a human being instead of property. Sometimes I think those dreams are the only thing keeping me alive." That letter changed something fundamental in Isaiah. Before reading it, he'd fought for the Union cause, for preserving the nation as an abstract concept. After reading it, he fought for something far more personal, his sister's right to be free, spread out. Bull whispered to his men, "Tommy, you and Clayton circle left. Kowalski brothers take the right flank. I'll continue straight ahead. If you see anything at all, signal before shooting. Could be our runaway has friends." Isaiah watched the group split, their formation spreading across a 100-yard front. Sound tactical decision that would have worked against most opponents. But Isaiah had spent 2 years learning to fight outnumbered and outgunned. He'd survived battles where entire regiments were decimated, where life and death differences measured in inches and split seconds. The 54th Massachusetts had been thrown into some of the war's bloodiest engagements, often used as shock troops in desperate situations. At Fort Wagner, Isaiah watched half his regiment die in a futile assault on Confederate fortifications. At Olustee, he'd held position against overwhelming odds while comrades retreated. Each battle taught something new about survival, about the thin line between courage and stupidity. But more than tactical knowledge, the war taught Isaiah about evil's nature. He'd seen Confederate soldiers execute captured black troops, rather than take them prisoner. Witnessed massacre aftermaths, where wounded Union soldiers had been bayoneted in their hospital beds. Learned that some people were beyond redemption, that mercy sometimes meant weakness. Tommy Briggs separated first from the group, youthful enthusiasm overriding caution. He moved through underbrush, with the subtle grace of a charging bull, snapping twigs and rustling leaves with every step. Isaiah tracked him through his scope, noting how the young man's hands trembled, slightly gripping his rifle. From conversation fragments carried on wind, Isaiah learned Tommy was new to bounty hunting. The boy had joined Bull's crew only a month ago, drawn by easy money and adventure stories. He probably had no idea what he'd actually signed up for. The brutality, the moral compromises, whatever humanity he possessed gradually eroding. Isaiah had encountered boys like Tommy during the war, young soldiers who'd enlisted with romantic notions of glory and honor, only to discover combat mostly meant fear, confusion, and sudden death. Some adapted and became hardened veterans. Others broke under pressure, deserting or going mad. A few, like Tommy, seemed embracing violence with an enthusiasm more disturbing than fear. But ignorance, Isaiah knew, wasn't innocence. The boy made his choice, deciding to hunt human beings for profit. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now he'd face consequences. Clayton Webb moved with greater experience, deliberate and controlled movements. As former overseer, he understood fear and intimidation psychology. He'd spent years perfecting spirit, breaking and hope-crushing arts. Isaiah had encountered men like Clayton before, men who took pleasure in others' suffering, who saw cruelty as precision tool. The overseer's reputation preceded him. Isaiah had heard stories from escaped slaves about Clayton's methods, about creative punishments he devised for minor infractions. The man didn't simply enforce discipline. He enjoyed it, took pleasure from power over helpless people, and that made him more dangerous than simple greed or desperation. Clayton carried himself with confidence of someone never facing real consequences. The plantation system protected him, gave legal authority to brutalize human beings without fear of retribution. But that protection didn't extend to these woods, and Clayton was about learning some debts eventually come due. The Kowalski brothers moved as unit, their coordination speaking to years working together. They communicated through hand signals and subtle gestures, rifles sweeping back and forth in overlapping fields of fire. Professionals, and that made them dangerous. Stefan and Pavel had learned their trade in Eastern Europe's harsh forests, hunting deserters and political refugees for Austrian authorities. They'd immigrated to America not for freedom or opportunity, but because pay was better and authorities asked fewer questions. They brought Old World brutality to New World problems, their methods efficient if not humane. The brothers had developed their own runaway tracking and capture system. Stefan followed trail, while Pavel circled ahead, setting ambush positions. They worked with wolf pack coordination, their success rate among the business's highest. But they'd never faced prey that could hunt them back. Bull Henderson, though, was the real threat. The leader moved with careful deliberation of a man surviving countless dangerous situations. Through skill combination, cunning, and ruthless pragmatism. His eyes constantly scanned terrain, searching for ambush or trap signs. He understood confidence could prove fatal, and he'd learned trusting instincts even when logic suggested otherwise. Bull's reputation built on more than successful captures. He was known for ability to think like prey, anticipate moves and position accordingly. He'd tracked runaways through swamps and mountains, cities and wilderness, always staying one step ahead of quarry. But Bull's greatest strength was also weakness. He'd spent so long hunting defenseless people he'd forgotten what facing real opponent felt like. His tactics designed for pursuing frightened, desperate people with no military training and limited resources. He was about discovering those same tactics useless against a trained soldier with superior position and firepower. Isaiah shifted position slightly, moving to different branch offering better angle on scattered hunters. The movement was silent, practiced, result of countless training hours and real-world experience. Below, none of the five noticed subtle shadow shift in the canopy. The new position offered multiple advantages. He could see all five targets clearly, had multiple escape routes if situation deteriorated, could control engagement from beginning to end. Most importantly, he could choose engagement order to maximize psychological impact on survivors. Settling into his new position, Isaiah's mind drifted to Sarah. His sister had been only 14 when sold to Whitmore Plantation, torn from family to settle debt their former master incurred. Isaiah had been powerless stopping it then, just another property piece with no legal rights or recourse. That day's memory still burned. Sarah had been working in kitchen when slave trader arrived, and she'd run to Isaiah realizing what was happening. He'd held her as she cried, promised he'd find way to get her back, but they both knew it was empty promise. Slaves had no power protecting families, no legal recourse when loved ones were sold. The trader had been thin, nervous man avoiding eye contact while conducting business. He'd examined Sarah like livestock, checking teeth and muscles, inquiring about health and work history. The transaction took less than 10 minutes. Then she was gone, loaded into wagon with 3 other slaves, driven away. Isaiah watched until wagon disappeared over hill, then made himself a promise. Someday, somehow, he'd find way freeing his sister. He'd had no idea how he'd do it, but he swore he wouldn't rest until Sarah was safe. The war changed everything. When President Lincoln issued Emancipation Proclamation, Isaiah saw opportunity not just for freedom, but for chance fighting back against system that had stolen his family. He enlisted in 54th Massachusetts, one of first official African-American units in Union Army. Training was brutal, prejudice from white soldiers constant, mortality rate staggering. But Isaiah endured it all because he knew every Confederate soldier he killed brought him one step closer to a world where his sister could be free. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd become one of Union Army's most effective killers in order to save a life. He'd learned taking human life with clinical precision so his sister could have chance living as human being rather than property. Now, watching bounty hunters spread through forest below, Isaiah felt familiar calm preceding action. These men represented everything he'd been fighting against. The belief that human beings could be owned, bought, sold, hunted like animals. Tonight they'd learn some prey fought back. The wind picked up, causing branches around Isaiah to sway gently. Below, Bull Henderson stopped suddenly, head tilted as if listening for something. The old bounty hunter's instincts screamed warnings, though he couldn't identify Unee's source. Isaiah smiled grimly as he centered crosshairs on first target. The hunt was beginning, but this time roles would reverse. These men spent careers as predators, but they were about discovering what being prey felt like. The forest held its breath as Isaiah Washington prepared delivering justice with master craftsman's precision. The war taught him many things, but most important lesson was this: sometimes the only way stopping evil is destroying it completely. The first shot shattered forest silence like thunder. Tommy Briggs had been examining Broken Branch, convinced he'd found fresh sign of quarry's passage, when Isaiah's bullet found its mark. The young bounty hunter dropped instantly, rifle clattering against rocks as body crumpled to forest floor. The .58 caliber bullet struck center mass, impact spinning him around before collapsing face first into damp earth. The remaining 4 reacted with trained fighter reflexes, diving for cover behind trees and fallen logs, but numbers advantage meant nothing when unable seeing enemy. The shot came from somewhere above and ahead, though echo made pinpointing exact location impossible. "Tommy!" Clayton Webb shouted, voice echoing through trees. "Tommy, you hit bad." No response. In sudden silence following, only sounds were wind whispering through leaves and frightened men breathing rapidly. Tommy's body lay motionless in spreading blood pool, young face frozen in surprised and pained expression. Bull Henderson pressed against massive pine trunk, mind racing processing what just happened. The shot came from above and ahead somewhere in canopied. That meant their hunter elevated, probably in tree, with clear fire field over entire area. The shot's precision told Bull everything about their opponent. Tommy had been moving, partially concealed by underbrush at least 100 yards range. Only master marksmen could make that shot, and only someone with military training would have patience waiting perfect moment. "Professional?" Bull muttered. This wasn't some panicked runaway taking desperate shot. This was trained marksman positioned perfectly, waiting right moment striking. Bull's mind raced possibilities. Union raiders sometimes operated this far south, but they usually traveled larger groups and made more noise. Deserters were common, but most lacked skill and equipment for precision shooting like this. That left one possibility chilling Bull's blood. They faced Union sniper, probably someone with extensive combat experience. "Bull," one Kowalski brother called heavily accented English. "What we do?" "Stay down and quiet," Bull replied barely above whisper. "We're dealing with someone knowing his business." Stefan Kowalski pressed against fallen log, rifle pointed uselessly at canopy above. He'd fought in Austrian army before immigrating, seen combat in Italian campaigns. But this was different. Conventional warfare let you see enemy, predict movements, respond accordingly. This was like fighting ghost. Pavel crouched behind boulder 20 yards from brother, scanned trees with growing desperation. He'd always prided himself on tracking and locating hidden enemies, but sniper chose position perfectly. Morning sun created confusing light and shadow patterns in canopy, making distinguishing between branches and human shapes impossible. Isaiah had already moved to new position, flowing through branches with predator's silent grace. Combat years taught him sniper survival key was mobility. Take shot, then relocate before enemy could triangulate position. The new position offered several advantages. He was now 40 yards from original location, with clear view of all 4 remaining targets. More importantly, positioned between bounty hunters and their horses, cutting off most likely escape route. From new vantage point, he could see Clayton Webb crouched behind fallen log, rifle pointed uselessly at empty air. The former overseer's face paled with fear and confusion. He'd spent years terrorizing defenseless slaves, but never faced enemy striking back with deadly precision. Clayton's hands shook gripping rifle, and Isaiah could see sweat staining shirt despite cool morning air. The man began understanding he might not survive this encounter. That brutality years might finally catch up. Isaiah centered crosshairs on Clayton's exposed shoulder. The shot would prove painful but not immediately fatal. Isaiah wanted the man suffering, experiencing same fear and helplessness he'd inflicted on countless others. Second shot rang out, and Clayton screamed as bullet shattered collarbone. He rolled behind better cover, clutching wounded shoulder as blood seeped between fingers. Pain was excruciating, but worse than physical agony was psychological impact. Someone hunted them with same methodical precision they used on own prey. "He's in the trees!" Clayton shouted through gritted teeth. somewhere above us. Wound was severe but not life-threatening, exactly as Isaiah intended. Clayton would live long enough experiencing full terror. Wait, understanding what helpless prey felt like. Psychological warfare mattered as much as physical damage. Isaiah wanted remaining hunters, knowing they were completely at his mercy. Kowalski brothers immediately began firing into canopy, shots wild and desperate. Bark exploded from tree trunks as bullets whined through branches. But Isaiah was already gone, moving to yet another position. Their panic was exactly what he'd hoped. Frightened men made mistakes, and mistakes could be exploited. Stephen fired rapidly, working rifle bolt with practiced efficiency. But shots poorly aimed. He shot at shadows and movement, hoping getting lucky rather than targeting specific threats. Pavel was more controlled, taking careful aim before each shot, but aiming at positions Isaiah already abandoned. Bull Henderson watched men panic with growing frustration. They shot at shadows, wasting ammunition, revealing positions with every muzzle flash. This was exactly what enemy wanted. Confusion, fear, tactical mistakes. "Stop shooting!" Bull roared. "You're just telling him where you are!" But too late. Isaiah had marked both Kowalski brothers' positions, already lining up third shot. Stefan, the elder, made mistake exposing himself while trying better angle on trees above. Stefan partially concealed behind fallen tree, but left side exposed trying tracking movement in canopy. Isaiah could see concentration on man's face, squinting trying identifying targets among branches. The Austrian was professional, but fighting unfamiliar terrain against enemy, holding every advantage. Isaiah's bullet caught Stefan in chest, spinning him around before collapsing behind boulder. Shot perfectly placed, striking just below heart, causing massive internal damage. Stefan tried calling brother, but blood-filled lungs and only wet gurgle emerged. Pavel saw brother fall and cried anguish and rage, abandoning all caution charging toward trees, where he thought shots originated. The younger Kowalski was beyond rational thought now, driven by grief and fury to desperate assault on invisible enemy. Exactly reaction Isaiah hoped for. Pavel Kowalski ran directly into killing zone, rifle blazing firing wildly into canopy. Isaiah tracked through scope, leading target slightly accounting for movement. Pavel screamed in Polish while charging, words incomprehensible but meaning clear. He called vengeance, blood, chance killing man murdering brother, but emotional state made predictable, and predictable enemies were dead enemies. Fourth shot ended Pavel's charge permanently. Bullet struck head, killing instantly, sending body tumbling into ravine. Rifle flew from hands, clattering against rocks before disappearing into underbrush. Now only Bull Henderson and wounded Clayton Webb remained, and Isaiah sensed growing desperation. They were trapped in an impossible situation, pinned by invisible enemies striking at will while remaining completely hidden. Bull's mind raced formulating plan. He'd faced desperate situations before, but never anything like this. Enemy clearly trained soldier, probably war veteran. But what was Union soldier doing this far south? And why protecting runaway slave? Tactical situation hopeless. They were outnumbered by enemy holding superior position and firepower. Their only advantages, numbers and local knowledge, neutralized by sniper skill and preparation. Bull realized only survival chance was somehow turning this into negotiation rather than battle. Unless you're not just protecting some runaway. Bull called, voice carrying through forest. This is personal. Isaiah didn't respond. But Bull's words struck close to truth. Old bounty hunter's instincts told him this wasn't random encounter. Someone deliberately set trap, and they'd walked right in. Bull survived 2 decades dangerous profession, understanding human nature. People didn't risk lives for strangers, especially not with odds so heavily stacked. This commitment level, This willingness taking on 5 armed men single-handedly suggested personal motivation. "We were tracking a woman," Bull continued, hoping drawing enemy conversation. "Young girl, maybe 20, pretty little thing with scar on left hand. That means something to you." Isaiah's finger tightened on trigger. These men had hunted Sarah. Probably been close enough capturing her. Thought of sister in their hands filled cold rage, threatening, overwhelmed tactical discipline. Scar Bull mentioned was real. Sarah, cut hand on broken bottle at 12, wound healing poorly. Detail only someone seeing her recently would know, meaning these bastards had been closer catching her than Isaiah realized. But he forced calm. Emotion was precision's enemy, and couldn't afford mistakes now. Sarah's still out there, still danger, and first priority had to be eliminating immediate threat. "She's your sister, isn't she?" Bull pressed, sensing finding weakness. "That's why you're here. That's why you're willing killing for her." Clayton Webb, still clutching wounded shoulder, saw opportunity. While Bull kept enemy distracted with conversation, he began crawling toward position offering better angle on trees above. If he could just get close enough, maybe spotting sniper and taking down. Clayton's movement clumsy and obvious, hampered by wound and fear. He left clear trail in soft earth, labored breathing audible even at distance, but desperation made willing taking risks rational man would avoid. But Isaiah watched both men, tracking movements even as Bull tried psychological warfare engagement. He could see Clayton's clumsy flank attempt, could read desperation in wounded man's movements. Former overseer crawled through underbrush like wounded animal, leaving blood trail and disturbed vegetation. Rifle clutched good hand, but movements too erratic for accurate shooting. He operated on adrenaline and desperation, making dangerous but also predictable. "You know what we do runaways when catching," Bull continued, voice taking cruel edge. "Especially pretty ones. Your sister's probably already back chains, probably already learning what happens slaves trying run." Words calculated, provoking emotional response, making Isaiah angry enough making mistake. Bull used similar tactics before, playing on prey's fears and emotions, gaining tactical advantages. But he dealt with trained soldier now, someone understanding psychological warfare. Isaiah's jaw clenched, but didn't take bait. Instead, shifted aim to Clayton Webb. Now only 20 yards from tree. Former overseer thought clever, but actually made easier target. Clayton managed crawling rifle range of Isaiah's position, but wounds slowed and affected accuracy. He breathed heavily, hands shaking from blood loss and adrenaline. When finally raised rifle taking shot, movements clumsy and obvious. Fifth shot caught Clayton head, ending suffering instantly. Bullet struck just above left eye, killing before even registering impact. Body slumped forward, rifle falling from nerveless fingers. Now only Bull Henderson remained, alone in forest becoming tomb. Old bounty hunter realized psychological tactics failed, running options short. Enemy patient, disciplined, utterly ruthless. But Bull Henderson hadn't survived 20 years, hunting dangerous men by giving easily. If dying these woods, he'd at least try taking killer with him. Still had rifle experience, cunning. Not much, but all left. As shadows lengthened and forest darkened, final confrontation between hunter and hunted was beginning. Bull Henderson was about learning some prey, was more dangerous than any predator. Bull Henderson crouched behind ancient oak's massive trunk, breathing shallow and controlled despite fear, knowing gut. 20 years bounty hunting, never faced opponent like this. Someone combining military training with personal motivation and true predator patience. Forest had fallen silent except wind whispering leaves and distant nightbird call. 4 men lay dead gathering dusk, bodies scattered forest floor like broken dolls. Bull alone now, facing enemy couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't escape. silence oppressive, broken only by heartbeat thundering ears. Bull always prided remaining calm under pressure. But this situation beyond anything experience. He was hunted by someone understanding warfare at level couldn't comprehend. But Marcus Henderson hadn't built reputation surrendering impossible odds. He'd survived encounters with desperate slaves, angry plantation owners, rival bounty hunters wanting to eliminate competition. He'd learned thinking like prey, anticipating moves and exploiting weaknesses. Mind raced through everything known about opponent. Shot precision suggested extensive military training, probably Union Army given willingness protecting runaway slave. Tactical patience indicated combat experience, someone understanding rushing led mistakes. Most importantly, personal motivation suggested this wasn't just about protecting random fugitive. Enemy good, better than good, but everyone had weaknesses. Sniper's obvious skill suggested military training, probably Union Army, meaning discipline, but also certain conduct codes potentially exploitable. Military men, Bull knew, often struggled transitioning conventional warfare to civilian conflict brutal realities. They had rules. Honor codes could be turned against them. If Bull could somehow appeal those instincts, might create opening. "I know you hear me," Bull called steady despite circumstances. "You made point. Killed 4 men protecting 1 runaway. But this doesn't have ending with more blood." Isaiah remained silent, but listening. From position 40 feet above forest floor, could see Bull's hiding clearly. Old bounty hunter pressed tree base, rifle ready but pointed empty air. One shot would end this, but something made Isaiah hesitate. Perhaps curiosity what man would say, or perhaps soldier's instinct, gathering intelligence before acting. Either way, Isaiah content letting Bull talk while maintaining tactical advantage. "Your soldier," Bull continued. "Can tell fighting way. Disciplined, patient, professional. You probably got rules about killing unarmed men, about giving quarter those surrendering." Bull slowly stood, hands raised but still gripping rifle. "I'm offering walking away. Leave these woods. Forget about girl. Forget this happening. Got your revenge whatever we did your family. Let that enough. Offer calculated, designed appealing whatever honor sense sniper might possess." Bull studied enemies 2 decades, learned reading weaknesses and exploiting humanity. Military men, experience, often struggled with moral complexities killing outside formal warfare context. Isaiah's finger rested trigger, but didn't fire. Through scope, could see calculation in Bull's eyes. Muscles remained coiled despite apparent surrender. This wasn't genuine capitulation. Trap. Bull slowly turned circle, trying spotting enemy while maintaining surrender pretense. Rifle still hands, ready bringing bare moment identifying target. Old bounty hunter bought time, hoping creating opportunity desperate counterattack. "You know I can't do that." Isaiah finally spoke, voice carrying clearly through still air. "You spent 20 years hunting people like me, like sister. How many families destroyed? How many children dragged back misery leves?" Bull's eyes narrowed, trying pinpoint voice source. Sound seemed everywhere and nowhere, echoing trees making localization impossible. Sniper used forest acoustics masking position. Another professional training sign. "Just doing job," Bull replied. "Following law, collecting legal bounties. Your quarrel with system, not me." Words rang hollow even speaking. Bull knew crossing lines couldn't uncross. Done things far beyond simple law enforcement. Tortured information, captured slaves, killed runaways trying resist, separated families without second thought. But admitting that would admit deserving what about happened. Bull spent 20 years justifying actions, telling himself just businessmen operating within law. Alternative, accepting being monster profiting human misery. Too painful contemplating. System doesn't pull triggers, Isaiah said. System doesn't put shackles children or whip them crying mothers. Men like you do that. Men choosing profit over humanity. Bull slowly turned circle, trying spotting enemy, while maintaining surrender pretense. Rifle still hands, ready bringing bare moment identifying target. Old bounty hunter bought time, hoping creating opportunity desperate counterattack. Isaiah could see desperation in Bull's movements, eyes darting tree to tree searching any enemy sign. Man running options short, and desperate men dangerous, but also predictable. Your sister, Bull said playing final card. Still out there, still running. Every minute wasting here minute she's danger. Other hunters tracking her. Men who won't be easy kill as crew. Should protecting her, not wasting time revenge. Words hit mark. Isaiah felt concern stab. Bull right about one thing. Sarah still danger. Still making north through hostile territory. Every moment spent here was time needing protection, but also new men like Bull Henderson never stopped hunting. Even if Isaiah let go, bounty hunter would simply recruit new men, continuing brutal trade. Only way truly protecting Sarah and others like her was ensuring this particular predator never hunted again. Moral calculus simple. Bull Henderson spent 20 years destroying lives, separating families, perpetuating human bondage system. Made choices, now would face consequences. Isaiah had no more sympathy than for rabid dog. You're right about one thing, Isaiah said. Should protecting sister. That's exactly what doing. Bull spun toward voice, rifle coming smooth motion. Finally pinpointed Isaiah's general location and brought weapon bare when sixth shot rang out. But Isaiah's bullet didn't kill Bull Henderson. Instead, shattered bounty hunter's rifle, sending wood splinters and metal flying. Bull stumbled backward, hands stinging impact, primary weapon destroyed. Shot was skill demonstration, message Isaiah could kill Bull any moment, but chose not. Psychological warfare finest, designed showing bounty hunter exactly how helpless. Bull stared rifle ruins shock. Weapon companion over decade, trade tool, livelihood source. Now nothing but twisted metal and splintered wood, destroyed by marksmen, whose skill beyond anything Bull encountered. Want no difference between us. Isaiah called smoothly working Springfield bolt. You hunt money. I hunt justice. Bull reached hip pistol, but Isaiah already lined final shot. Through scope, could see desperation in bounty hunter's eyes. Moment Bull realized all experience and cunning insufficient against enemy fighting something greater than profit. Old bounty hunter's hand halfway sidearm when froze. Understanding finally dawning eyes. Completely outmatched, facing enemy possessing superior skill, position, motivation. No escape, no last-minute reprieve, no opportunity desperate counterattack. Bull Henderson spent 20 years predator, but now understood what being prey felt.